All right, hand reading. Let's see if we can do this in a relatively simple way. Hand reading is more about putting players on a range of hands more than the specific holding. It's just sometimes as we narrow that range down, we are going to get into more and more specific holdings where sometimes we can actually pin them down to a couple of cards. I'm no pro, or I'd be a millionaire in Vegas, but I've done a lot of work and a lot of study in this area, and most of us decent poker players do. This is a software program called Flopzilla. It's a paid program. You can download one called PokerStove here for free. They do similar things, but I like what PokerStove does a little bit better, Flopzilla does a little bit better in terms of helping me narrow down ranges. This is something that I will do when I go to the casino boat, or something that I do online when I have a hand that is really, really interesting. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write it down step by step by step. I'm going to pause the video, I'm going to write one down, and I'll come back and I'll show you how we work our way through it. So hold on a second. All right, so here's a hand that I played relatively recently that's kind of fun for discussion. One thing you'll find, there's a lot of different ways to play hands. There's a lot of discussion that goes around when it comes to maybe the optimal way to play a hand. But what you're going to find as we're learning and studying as poker players, it's good to have a buddy to bounce these things off of and talk to, because a lot of it depends on putting your opponent on a particular range. And that's going to come down to a few things. As I get rid of that for a second, it's going to come down to a few things. First of all, what have you noticed in your opponent? Is he tight? Is he loose? Is he aggressive? Is he passive? These all make up ranges, and it's a good thing to start thinking in terms of, I don't know, just kind of default ranges. Live at the boat, different online, so don't take this for gospel online, but live at the boat, typically the default starting range of hands for a player, at least at my level, is about 30 to 35% of hands. That's a lot of hands. And they raise about 6% of their hands, and they actually re-raise your raise about 0.8%. It's a broad generalization. Every player is different, but if you think in terms, if you memorize what that 35% range is and sort of start there, is this player tighter than that? Is he looser than that? Is he more aggressive than the 6% or not? So here's what we'll do first is we'll take this little bar here, and this is the hand chart, right? This is King 9 suited. This is pocket 10s. This is Queen 8 offsuit, okay? And you can see all of the different combinations of Queen 8 offsuit popping up over right in this range when I hover over it. You can see, you know, Queen of Hearts, 8 of Clubs, Queen of Hearts, 8 of Diamonds, Queen of Hearts, 8 of Spades. If you go down that left-hand column, and then that's basically first card is the Queen, second card is the 8. That's all the different combinations. We'll talk about combinations and combinatrix and stuff at a different date, because it's important too to know that there any unsuited hand or any off-suited, there's 16 combinations, and any suited hand there's only 4 combinations. That's pretty easy stuff to remember or memorize. Pocket pairs, there are 6 combinations of pocket pairs. But what we're memorizing that stuff for is a lot of times as different cards drop or different cards get represented, we can cut down the number of combinations that a player has, and that helps us narrow down the frequency at which they could be doing what with whatever it is that they have. So in a nutshell, that's a teaser for a later time, but I would start by sliding this bar over to about 35% of hands, right? And that opens up the world. And that range may not be exactly perfect. This guy might not play Queen 5 or Queen 6 suited. He might play 6-5 or 5-4 suited instead. This is where we get to play with this range a little bit. Maybe he doesn't play all of his suited kings. I mean, a lot of but generally speaking, players do. Maybe he plays these gappers instead. So whatever. So I'm down to 35.8% of hands. I massaged it a touch. Maybe he plays all aces. You know, who knows? But the point is, now what are we at? 37%. This is a pretty fair range for the average low stakes casino player type. These are the hands that these guys are limping with. Now they're going to raise the top 6% of hands. So let's mind this. Let's remember this range in general, and let's come out here to the top 6% of hands. about there. So maybe 8s are better. Ace 10 suited, ace queen, ace king, whatever. It's about 6.5%. So roughly, when a player raises in front of you at the casino. Now you're online; it's a different world over there. But at the casino, this is about what you can say he's raising with. It varies a little from here or there, but generally speaking, until you see him show down cards differently, assume this is what he typically has. So if I start with this range, it's easy to narrow down what he might have based on how the board runs out if I remember that these are the cards he probably started with, right? It's like just because the board pairs a 7 and all of a sudden he comes flinging, flying, flying into the pot. I don't all of a sudden change my mind and say, oh my God, he must have the 7. No, the 7 should not be in this guy's range. He raised pre-flop. There is no pocket 7s. There are no 7s, in a connected fashion, suited or otherwise, in his range. So they didn't just magically appear. The 7 is very, very unlikely. He might be bluffing. These are things that you have to go through with practice. And I mean practice. I mean thousands of hands of practice, not just a week. I'm talking thousands of hands. In some cases, tens of thousands of hands of practice. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to narrow these ranges down as the hand goes on. So if I come down here to that 35-36% range, right, add in the suited aces, add in the gappers, maybe down here, take out some of the junk like here, here, whatever. Get him down to about, and then start taking out that 6%, right? Because he didn't raise, if the guy didn't raise pre-flop, he probably doesn't have these particular hands in his range, right? He would have raised those, so those can't be in there. See, so I've got to find a starting point, and that's the whole idea. So I'll cut that off here and let you digest that, and then I'll start working on the next video, which is where to go from here when we actually play a hand. But start working in your mind, memorize some of these charts or memorize some of these little pieces of software. Learn what a 20% range is, what a 30%, 40% range is. Learn what a 10% raising range is. Learn what a 2% 3-bet or re-raising range is, because what you're going to need to do is have those somewhat internalized so that you can then have a starting point when we start drawing from the board and the actions of our opponent and what it tells us he might have. Because what we're going to do is we're going to plug these into basically a funnel. We're going to start off with everything wide open here. And then as the hand goes, based on what he does, we'll be able to cut certain hands out of this range and narrow it down. And then as the turn hits, narrow it down. And as the river hits, narrow it down. And then we'll have a pretty tight range on what he has. And we don't too terribly often miss. It's just a matter of, if it's 50-50 that he's got a bluff or the nuts, shit, we need to look at our pot odds at that point, and is it worth a 50% gamble? Because we know we're going to be wrong half the time. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you only need 25%. Sometimes you need to be right 33% of the time. Whatever it is, that's where the math comes in. And these are the things that everybody can do with some practice and everybody can get better at. And you don't have to be perfect at it. But just by thinking along these lines and getting better at it and starting to practice this, your game will improve, because you will start thinking beyond the level of what are my cards and what should I do. You'll start thinking about not only what are my cards, but what are his cards. How is he acting? And then you'll go to the next level beyond that, which is, what does he think I have? What story am I telling him? And then you'll go into, have I done this before? Have I balanced my range with a number of bluffs versus a number of really, really strong hands before? Has he caught me in a bluff? Does he think I'm loose, or does he think I'm tight? You start thinking in terms of not just the cards in your hand, but what are all of the possible cards in his hand, and what does he think the possible cards are in my hand, and how can I size my bet accordingly to make him think I have what I don't have? Make sense? So anyway, let me cut it off here. We'll come back. We'll start with another video here in a minute. See ya.